Hello, everybody. John Napolitano here with you from Top Trading Pros. I hope everybody's doing well. I am sitting here on a Sunday, and I usually do my weekly analysis on the overall markets on Sunday. So I'm going to share with you in this video exactly my take for the markets ahead and what to expect for this week and some of the things that I am seeing in the markets. I usually pretty much also assign an overall grade to the market. That helps me assess my overall strategy for the week. It's part of my process. It's part of my plan. What I generally do is I grade the markets and decide, okay, how bullish or how bearish should I be? And it helps me position myself correctly based on what the market is telling me. So I am going to jump right in here. I'm going to make myself smaller and show you my screen. And as you can see, I have a chart here of the S&P 500. I use SPY just to kind of smooth out the lines and stuff like that. But basically, I keep the 20 and the 50-day moving averages on the chart. I keep things very simple when I'm assessing the markets. And I essentially try to be as objective as possible. This allows me to kind of not have any bias as any news that came out this week or what have you. I kind of like to just take a step back, be objective, and assess the overall markets. So last week, pretty much what I said was going to happen happened. We had a very choppy week. We really ended up going nowhere. The only exception was energy, which I had mentioned last week was also a very, very vulnerable sector. And I kind of explained why a little bit in my video last week. So I was correct in my assessment on energy. I put on some short positions on energy, and those ended up working out really well. Again, as far as the other stuff, I've been pretty much sideways. Remember, when you're trading options, it's just as important to pick out the correct strategy as it is to pick out whether you should be going long or going short. Puts and calls simply don't work in an environment like this. You have to come up with more creative strategies in order to draw some returns out of the market. So basically, the market, like you can see, the S&P was down 40.43%. The Qs or the NASDAQ was up 0.24. Dow Jones pretty much flat at negative 0.18%. Again, oil down almost 7%, as well as the energy sector as a whole. And you have gold. Gold was actually down as well. It was down 1.3%. So pretty choppy, pretty flattish kind of week. And that is pretty much what I sort of anticipate going into this week. I think there are not too many catalysts going into this week. So we'll talk about that as well. But as the overall assessment goes, the S&P was choppy, as you can see here. I'll make my screen a little bit bigger so you can see here. We kind of chopped around. We tested below the 20-day moving average. So basically, whenever we're below the 20-day moving average here and above the 50, we're still sort of in this uptrend. So I'm giving the market basically a B. So if you're getting a test grade, it's about a B. And the reason why it's a B is because pretty lackluster, pretty boring, pretty flat, didn't really move around too much. My line in the sand, by the way, between being bullish and bearish is always the 50-day moving average. I think that's a really good indicator of, overall trend and so on and so forth. So I usually use that as kind of my line in the sand, whether to be overall bullish or bearish. So I'm still bullish, even though I'm choppy and I think we're about a B. That's pretty much where I stand. So that's my overall take on the markets based on what I see in front of me. The Dow Jones underperformed, actually. You can see here, this is DIA. So if I had to kind of break it market by market, I would give the Dow Jones a B minus, I would say. And the Qs, or the NASDAQ actually has these moving averages that are sloping much higher. So if I had to kind of break it all down, I would say the Qs are still looking pretty good. It actually closed above the 20-day. You can see that little doji candle right here. So basically, I would have to give the Qs or the NASDAQ a B plus. So my overall take is a B. If I had to lean towards one area of the market, I would still say technology is kind of off its lows. It's showing some good relative strength. Even though it had a bad day on Friday, I think that there's some still opportunity there. Overall, that is my take on the markets. If you look at some areas too, like so sector by sector, I'm not going to go through every 10 sector, but one of the things I will do is I will look at the overall energy, or I would look at different sectors and just kind of dissecting one of them for you. I'm not going to dissect all 10 sectors for you, but basically, you could see the relative weakness in energy. You can see these moving averages are very poor. You have a lower high here. I kind of drew some lines here so you could see where I'm coming from. And basically, yeah, you have a high here, you have a lower high, and here's where we close, well below the moving averages. You're basically kind of in this kind of choppy area, and then really it'll probably bounce. You got this, area of a really strong area of support at this kind of 82 level, I would say. This is XLE, by the way. This is the energy sector. And basically, I do anticipate maybe a little bit of a bounce. And then after that, I mean, there's really nowhere to go here except for maybe this area down here. So I think this trend is going to continue. I mean, and it's not really what I think, it's what I'm seeing in front of me. It just sees a lot of relative weakness. Another thing to note down here, it's kind of hard to see because I drew a line here, but basically on the way down, you have heavier volume, which means there's obviously more sellers than buyers. It's really that simple when you're kind of analyzing charts. A lot of people put all these fancy indicators and oscillators on their charts, but what I like to look at is price action. And when I see heavy volume on the way down, that's simply telling me that institutions and large banks and big money players are dumping energy right now. And it makes sense if you think about it. I talked about this last week because the last 2 years, energy has been extremely strong. So it does make sense that you'll see continued vulnerability and weakness in the energy sector. So that's kind of my take on the overall markets. I think, if you're going to go long, I think some of the stronger sectors are obviously tech. Another strong sector that I really liked was the consumer sector. Now, we have retail earnings coming out this week. We have some names at the end of February that report. I believe Target is one of them. There's a few others. So when you are trading, just be careful around earnings, not to get caught up in that. You might end up with a nasty surprise. But overall, the apparel and retail industry is actually looking pretty good. I was taking a look at one thing. Let me just go to a new chart here. There are a couple of interesting things. I was looking at Abercrombie and Finch, kind of an old school name here, but look how beautiful this chart looks. I'm gonna make this a little bit bigger for you so you guys can see. It's really quite fantastic here. It's had a nice run. The only problem is you have earnings coming out March 1st. So just be careful, there might be some strength going into earnings. And if it gets a nasty surprise, it also has a 10% short float. So you got, you might get some short covering into earnings, which is the reason maybe why it's kind of rallying a little bit. These are all things you have to kind of watch out for when you're trading in and around earnings. So if you stick with me, if you spend some time with me in my boot camp and toptradingpros.com, my next boot camp actually begins this Monday. I would love to have some of you guys. We could talk, we talk about like names going into earnings on my coaching calls. You'll have access to the Discord channel where we discuss ideas and stuff like that. And I basically give my overall assessment of the market every single week. I also give a midweek recap, which discusses kind of if there are any changes, because obviously, in the middle of the week, you could get a change. And that's usually in the midweek recap. I usually cover that if there's any type of big move in a sector or if the markets roll over or something like that. I do discuss that. One final thing I want to talk about is the volatility index. The VIX actually has been kind of poking its head up a little bit. So that's something as an options trader, you always have to kind of watch out for. You have to make sure that you're always aware of how strong volatility is. It is kind of at its moving average here. So, hopefully we don't spike. If it does spike, you have to change your option strategy to kind of match what the volatility in the markets are giving you. So I'm going to keep one eye on that. If the VIX continues to go higher, that's something that's going to also adjust my option strategy. And that's something I talk about in my classes as well. What strategies to use and when, which is just as important as picking the right stocks when you're trading options. So again, I hope this video is helpful, just kind of going into the markets and kind of assessing, what's going on. If I'm a B in the markets, obviously, if I have 10 trades, not all of my trades are going to be bullish. I'm going to be bullish and maybe a little bit of bearish. I'll have some energy names in there that I'm short. I might have some other areas like basic materials was also a weak sector that I looked at. That might be an area where I'm going to look to add short positions. On the long side, technology and consumer are probably my two favorite sectors going into this week. And we'll see what happens. I'm not always right. It's not about being right. It's about being consistent. It's about having a plan going into the week. As far as economic data goes, it's a fairly quiet week. We have FOMC minutes on Wednesday. We have some G20 meetings going on also. So you could always get some kind of headline risk and stuff like that, or those kind of type of meetings where all the world leaders are meeting. But really, you can't trade around the news. You have to just be aware they're going on and just kind of be cautious when you're placing orders and stuff like that. So I hope this video was helpful. I really, I enjoy doing this every week. It's one of the favorite things I do in the week to kind of take a step back and be objective. And I think that's really important when it comes to trading, because there's so much news out there that could kind of sway your opinion and your judgment. So that's my overall take. I hope you enjoyed this. Just be careful out there. And again, always manage your risk. Always take care of, your overall portfolio. Make sure that you're not betting more than you should. And that will keep you in the game as long as possible. So take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll talk to you guys soon. Okay, bye-bye.